Well, for those who've just joined us, welcome to Furnishing Our Future Forward. I'd now like to introduce you to Christian Stratton to start the session. Over to you, Christian.
Thank you, and good morning or good afternoon to everyone, as I know we've got participants joining from a range of time zones. My name's Christian Stratton. I'm privileged to be the Chair of the Furnishing Industry Reference Committee, or IRC as it's generally referred to. In the spirit of reconciliation, the IPSA Manufacturing acknowledges the traditional custodians of the country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. So welcome everyone, particularly to our panellists for today, my fellow IRC members. Thank you for making the time to participate in what is a very important conversation today. This is the last of a series of focused webinars hosted by IPSA Manufacturing on behalf of the Industry Reference Committees, to further the conversation around what skills are required and how to ensure that they are made available to Australian industry and its workforce in the light of the government's 6 national manufacturing priority areas. As you can see from the overview diagram, the outcomes of the webinar series will provide government the relevant on-the-ground advice from industry that they have requested and ensure the voice is heard. We're really pleased to commence today with a short video from the Honourable Michaelia Cash, Minister for Employment, Skills, Small and Family Business, to give you a little bit of additional context for our discussions today.
As the Minister for Employment, Skills, Small and Family Business, I'm delighted to be part of this webinar series. I'd like to thank IBSA Group for their leadership in bringing together so many people across diverse industry networks. The Morrison government recognises the role of the manufacturing sector to the future prosperity of the Australian economy, and these events are a great way to provide relevant and practical feedback and advice back to government so that we can ensure the best possible outcomes for industry. The modern manufacturing strategy is a central plank of the Morrison government's agenda to fast-track Australia's economic recovery and secure future jobs and growth. Of course, an important element of delivering modern manufacturing in Australia is having the right sort of skilled workers across all 6 national manufacturing priorities. Our vocational education and training system is critical to the national economy and ensuring Australia's future prosperity. We need to support people to get the skills that will help us rebuild. And our role as a government is to get the policy settings right to ensure that those in the workforce have the opportunity to upskill and reskill. We know you need a strong, responsive and adaptable training system that can meet the needs of learners and employers. This is particularly important for the manufacturing industry, with a large percentage of your workforce gaining their skills through vocational education and training courses. And that's why the Morrison government is investing around $7 billion this year alone in the VET system, the biggest investment on record. You, as businesses and industry, have already told us that you need a pipeline of skilled workers to support our economic recovery. And that's why we announced a $1.2 billion investment to help create 100,000 new apprenticeships through the Boosting Apprenticeships Commencement Wage Subsidy. It's also why we established our $1 billion Job Trainer Fund, which will provide over 300,000 additional free or low-cost training places in sectors of demand. We also established the National Skills Commission to provide a new source of intelligence on Australia's labour market, workforce changes and current and emerging skills needs. That is the key, areas of skills needs. In other words, a focus on training in areas of anticipated employment growth like modern manufacturing. The Morrison government will continue to do all that it can to support Australian manufacturing, with a focus on getting more Australians trained with the right skills to drive this important industry. This is going to be a skills-led recovery, and your engagement with events like this IBSA webinar series are a key part of getting it right. I thank you for your support and dedication to grow and modernise the manufacturing sector, and I really hope that your discussions are productive. Enjoy the webinar.
As you've just heard from Minister Cash, today really does present an exciting opportunity for industry to provide input into the rollout of the modern manufacturing strategy, particularly in relation to how the furnishing industry can not only support the priority areas, but also ensure that we have the skilled workforce required for competitive advantage into the future. In terms of the format, I'm pleased to have some important panellists with us today. They'll participate in the Q&A session for approximately 30 minutes, followed by the opportunity for more in-depth discussions in facilitated breakout groups. We'll come back following that, just finalise the day with a short plenary session about where we're going to next. From a technical perspective, we really encourage people to use the chat function, both the sessions, both the breakout groups and the Q&A, and we'll get to as many questions as we can throughout there. If you could just ensure that your computers are mic'd, we have around about 80 registrants today, so obviously if we can just make sure we've got our microphones muted when we're not speaking, that'll be fantastic. But really, just before we get things going, I mean, today the purpose is really based on the recent announcement of the Commonwealth Government's manufacturing strategy and the budget incentives. We've really got an opportunity to start shaping how that looks for the furnishing sector. So I welcome today's opportunity to talk to you all, be involved in listening to the debate of what's going on and what may look best for us into the future. But in the interest of time, I'm going to hand over to Phil Clark from IBSA, who's going to facilitate the Q&A session. Phil, over to you.
I'm not sure that Phil's on. I think he's having internet difficulties. So I'll go ahead. It's Antoinette Hewitt, and I'll go ahead and facilitate the QA session. So this afternoon, I'd like to welcome our 4 panellists. We've got Joanne Kellogg from the Design Institute of Australia, Peter Kitely from Kianush Design, Sasha Kraft from Salter Cabinets, and Stephen Quirk, who's our IRC member, representing the Blinds Manufacturers Association of Australia, and also from Frontline Group. So welcome to our panellists. I'll start with the first question. So what is the future of the furnishing industry over the next 2 to 5 years? I'll direct that question to you, Jo. What do you see is the future of furnishing design industry going forward in that timeline?
So in terms of the design sector, actually we've come through COVID, actually compared to some of the retail industry, in quite good shape. In fact, some of our members have reported that they've been doing really well. It depends whether they're in a bricks and mortar store or it depends if they were just starting out. And one of the things that I've always had some concerns around in terms of planning for our future workforce is that we are also experiencing our members moving up and down the supply chain and across the disciplines. And in order to retrain, we tend to fund apprenticeships for the entry stage and not further for somebody wanting to do a career change. And I've always thought, given that we've got a desire to support advanced manufacturing, that that's a bit of a tragedy, that some of that money, that pool of funds, couldn't be allocated to allow for the change of careers at a more mature stage. But interestingly, the trends that were happening pre-COVID have been accelerated during COVID. And we expect, if you look at history tells us after a pandemic, it's always been a bit of a cleaning out of the old and a period of enormous acceleration in growth. And particularly in the area of technology, sampling for designers and the tools that will be available to them, depending on the discipline, and I'm talking about additive manufacturing for those that are developing product. For those in comms, I'm talking about artificial intelligence and algorithms and supporting ethical practices that don't all mean that we're all going to be addicted to screen time. In terms of those providing the service, as in interior designers and decorators, then they are very much moving into the wellbeing space. And I think that's an opportunity for interiors to really make some inroads and cement their position and their value within the industry. And what do I mean about wellbeing? Well, it's everything from safety of chemicals in furnishings to adequate lighting, all the OH&S areas. And as we've all had to learn to work from home, it's about designing spaces that are reconfigurable. So having, depending on the discipline, it varies in terms of what we think is going to be required in years. But I think we have to design flexible systems that allow them to move freely depending on the work. And the old disciplines seem to be dismantling. We've got graphic designers that are now in interiors, and we have, in terms of the fashion designers, have moved into interiors and vice versa. So those old disciplines seem to be dismantled. And we had actually an education forum last night, and we got a bit of criticism about the naming of our categories for the awards. And I said, well, to be fair, from where I sit, and we have all of the educators as members of ours, that the names of the courses are changing and the departments under which they sit so frequently, it's almost impossible for us to keep up. And certainly I have some issues, you know, even with the renaming of, it's caused enormous difficulty for us when they drop the decoration off the Diploma of Interior Design and Decoration. And so there's issues for us across the board. The future, though, I think looks really bright. And I'm really excited because I have a pet interest in advanced materials anyway. Designers fulfill that gap between R&D and commercialisation, particularly of product. Designers have influence over the services that they provide and specify materials, and how they also have a lot of control over the manufacturing process in terms of ethical practices. And designers, at the end of the day, form an integral part right across the supply chain. The Victorian government tells us that there's about 96,000 designers in Victoria, 6,000 businesses, and 2/3 of them are working in non-design practices. So that means the jobs for designers are not as visible as they once were. You know, there's accounting firms have design departments. So does Australia Post. The banks do. The health Bupa has a team of about 40 designers, I believe. So their jobs aren't where they used to be. And I think that has some interesting implications for the pillars or the 6 directions. And yeah, the dilemma for us is, how do we solve these problems?
Thanks, Jo. That's really interesting, your insights on that. Also, it's interesting that you say that design is integral across the supply chain. So are you able to call out some of those opportunities in the 6 priority areas that you see design may be able to take a role?
Joanne, if you can just unmute yourself and pop your webcam back on, thank you.
So, and going back to the 6 areas, like, you know, we have food designers, would you believe, resource technology and critical minerals processing. So what we find is that normally the normal thoughts around design is you bring them in at the beginning of a job, they draw a pretty picture or whatever, a 3-dimensional object, and that's it. But we find the role of designer is much, much more than that in these days. The services, we've got a category evolving in the industry for design that isn't in our discipline group, and that is around service design and the delivery of solutions for government, for government agencies. In terms of medical products, this morning I had a meeting with a company called Wilson Art. They interestingly deliver laminates, etc., to hospitals, and are wanting to connect with designers because the designers are the ones that specify the product. And so designers have a big influence on the decision making of materials, which in turn affects the manufacturing process. And a lot of designers complain to me that they don't get to stay with the whole process and the delivery of it. They're often brought in at the start, and then people will say, oh, we'll be right now. And then they're only called back when they think there's a problem. We're very much in the circular economy space because we believe designers can design out waste. We have some projects going with single-use plastics at the moment, and we've got a role in some of the things that are happening in Sydney at the new Product Stewardship Centre. In defence, in uniforms and advanced materials, designers play a huge role in that space. And so I see opportunities across the board. Do we have the units and competencies to match that? I'm sorry to say that I haven't briefed myself up on the latest. I have a look at units frequently because I'm trying to map across some of our CPD programs to what's in the units. But I think to be able to solve some of these problems, we actually have to nail the detail. But that means a lot of investigative work to see what's actually being delivered. If there was an easy solution to this, we could all do it really quickly, but it's not. It takes time, thought, conversation, and certainly collaborations.
Thanks, Jo. The theme of collaborations comes through on all of the sessions to date, so that's interesting that you're raising it as well. And similarly, the role of design in the whole circular process is featured. Can I just throw now to Peter Kitely? Peter, would you mind giving us your observations about the furnishing industry over the next 2 to 5 years?
Sure. I'm coming at this very much from a design practitioner point of view. I've also been heavily involved in the education world, so it's going to be a mixture of those sorts of views. In terms of the first thing I think that's fantastic is that we're here and we're talking about a plan. Over the years, if I have a chance today, I'd like to explain 2 or 3 plans that I've been involved with. The most recent one is working with the Malaysian government, because they've set in place a program to future-proof their furniture industry and their timber industry. And one of the ways that they're doing this is to invite designers in to work with their manufacturers. Because as Jo alluded to, some of the problems with the relationship between manufacturing and design is that the manufacturers don't really understand the role and the purpose and the abilities of the designer. And what this program does for Malaysia, with the Malaysian government, is that we, for example, were partnered with 2 Malaysian manufacturers at no cost to the manufacturer. And we went through a design process with them, which ended up with products as being shown at the Kuala Lumpur Furniture Show. And each year there are 6 designers from, this time around was 2 from Australia and 4 from Europe. And that's how they're introducing the idea and the benefits of design to their industry. the benefits and the possibilities going forward. I'm really excited about it because I see in the local markets, I'm here in Perth, there's talking to architects, interior designers and the retail section, that there seems to be a big push in the local market and in the national market for localism. That is, people are starting to ask where the products originate, and also about sustainability and the origins of the materials and so on. And I think that's a really good benefit and a possibility to consider and also work with in the promotion of the sustainable furniture industry. And by sustainable, I mean that it will continue to exist, plus also moving perhaps towards that area of sustainability and ethical production. People are concerned about things like food miles, and at the moment, I'll just talk about the market I know and understand here, is we seem to be in the position where we have, at either end of the spectrum, we have cheap imported furniture from Asia predominantly, and high-end expensive furniture imported from Italy, Germany. And there's a big hole in the middle, and I think that is an area that we could concentrate on, plus the high-end option. Because again, we can't compete at the low end, the price point end of the market. We just can't do that. But there is a big block of space there for us to move into, both as designers and as manufacturers. In terms of technology, I think is important, and again, some sort of incentive program from government would assist manufacturers to improve and upgrade their facilities and their equipment. Of course, what you have to realize is that as you introduce new technologies, there's a requirement there to either introduce new staff or to upskill staff into who are to become familiar with those technologies. And so that requires this link back into education and training. The system that my experience has been predominantly in the TAFE system, although now I work part-time in the university system. The need is for relevant and appropriate courses. I've been involved this year with a TAC group working on the Cert 4 and diploma of the design manufacturing rewrite on the manufacturing side. And it's still these big blocks of information, a one-year course followed by another one-year course. And what perhaps the industry needs is for sort of micro units, micro blocks of information, so that they can release employees to pick up a small block of information that will allow them to do a particular task. And I think that is something that the education system could look at. Small building blocks. The small building blocks might be combined to make a unit, and the units might be combined to make a course. And that way there can be a pathway of education development. It was interesting, and I'm glad that Joe spoke so well about the need and the benefits of design, because one of the things in the webinar briefing paper that I was a little bit sorry to see was there was very little information or discussion or even the word design in that paper. And there's been a big push by government, as we all know, to promote the idea of STEM topics, units. And I think that's a little bit scary. Science, technology, engineering, maths, I think all of them are incredibly important. but the little piece that's missing, that countries that were on the STEM path perhaps 10 or 15 years ago have realised that the part that's missing is the creativity and the design thinking and the imagination, which they put in under the word art, which is creating an acronym called STEAM. And I think that's a little unfortunate that art begins with A, because art has other connotations, particularly within the manufacturing industries. And unfortunately, creativity, design thinking, imagination, and perhaps philosophy didn't fit the acronym. So to summarise my part here is I'm really excited. What I'm most excited about is the possibility of a plan and the importance of the plan.
Thanks very much, Peter. That was really interesting and exciting to hear that we do have those opportunities in that push for localism. I was just wondering, besides the technical skills to apply the technologies and the creativity, is there anything else that workers will need in that new world?
What will they need in the new world? Support. I think they need, the industry needs, not just the apprentices and work cabinet makers and so on, but the management need to access and be made aware of and make it their business to also undergo professional development so they can maintain a picture of what's going on in the rest of the world and how the world is developing and developing rapidly. And I don't mean just in the technology side, but the way that people are talking about product design or sustainability and so on. And, you know, it's interesting that this is one of the things that the designer can bring to the table is a world view across many, many disciplines, because we are looking at, reading about, attending information sessions about all sorts of areas of creativity. And the important thing is that the designers can also, with regard to technology, test the capabilities of a machine. It's unfortunate sometimes when I walk into a factory and I see a beautiful CNC machine running, and basically all it's doing is cutting out panels and cutting them out really, really accurately many, many times. But I sometimes think that they're not pushing the capabilities of the machine. And that's what I think the designer could bring to the table.
Thank you, Peter. Great observations. I'll move on to Sasha now and just ask the same question of you, Sasha. What do you see is the future of furnishing industry over the next 2 to 5 years?
You can just unmute yourself, please, Sasha, at the bottom there, your screen.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm there now. Thanks, everyone. Well, I can tell you in the short term what can we do for the short term. Well, keep in mind that an apprenticeship takes 4 years to complete. Now, I'm just talking about the training part of this. So any changes that we'll start to implement now will only take effect really in 4 to 5 years. So short term is not really that relevant unless we do something now. Long term is more what we can think of, and like Peter said, CNC machine is something that will come and is not utilised enough because it's lacking the training. Specialisation of employees does only make sense though if they have a solid understanding of their core skill levels, which currently taught at TAFE. But that's not the case, I believe. The level of competency in our current apprentices is quite low. And in order for them to be upskilled, or in order for the industry to give them an opportunity to upskill themselves for that Industry 4.0, if you like to call it that way, they have to have a solid skill level first, and we don't have enough of those people at the moment. So we need to attract more apprentices to the industry in order to have a continuous flow of trades coming out of the apprenticeship that we can then upskill in little micro trainings, if you like. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense, Sasha. The other question I was going to ask you was around the opportunities in the modern manufacturing strategy. Do you see any opportunities being presented through that for the industry?
Yes. So if you're asking about more modern technology, well, most of our industry at the moment here is based on mid-sized businesses. Whereas if you look at Europe, for example, they've got large manufactories there. So the skill set for those people is slightly different than we have in small manufacturers. So in the future, would you most likely see that we're going down the same path? As we grow as a nation and have more people, there will be bigger opportunities. And hence the skill sets of those people will need to change. And that requires, rethinking of our current system. At the moment, our apprentices in the furniture industry, they are split between, you've got cabinet makers, you've got shop fitters, you've got furniture makers, you've got wood machinists. There's all these little sectors that attract their independent apprenticeship. And that's very hard to accommodate for TAFE, for example, for RTOs. So although they are all these apprenticeships that people can take up, not every state or city offers those apprenticeships, which then puts it back onto the TAFEs. We do have an industry in all those little sectors, but we're not actually training for it. So that makes it pretty hard for, let's say, a career path in the industry, because it's so many little sectors there that we can't just all cover. I believe we need a solid foundation of the apprenticeship system, combine a lot of the little sectors, have a core trainingship, and then from there on further educate those people into the sectors, and then have it more specific. For example, this could be, CNC machining, in order to move forward and to adapt to the future requirements of the industry.
Thanks very much, Sasha. That's interesting, your observation about the potentially need to consolidate a range of different apprenticeships so that they can be made available more broadly. I'd like to now call on Steve Quirk. Steve, what is the future of the furnishing industry over the next 2 to 5 years from your point of view?
Thanks very much, and good afternoon all. Our sector is window furnishing, and it's both part of the furnishing sector, furnishing manufacturing sector, but also the textile and manufacturing sector. Diverse range of businesses, from listed companies to small businesses, small operations, from operating out of shopping centres in some cases. The future as we see it, the key trends, the foundations for those trends have been laid by a prevalence of low-cost imports meeting an increased share of domestic demand. And that's over the last 5 years. That's led to a high volume of low-cost imports. Some would say flooding local markets. That in itself has led to high price competition, reduced profitability, and a reduced capacity for reinvestment. That has led to a focus on alternative markets and marketing, including export markets. But it's led to, and this is where the future lies with this sector, a revised focus on higher quality, custom products which themselves have a higher profitability. That future of high level customization, high level quality will be contained within two columns. On the one hand, imports will continue to be a factor, and equally the built environment, building construction, and the use of the built environment, as we've seen during COVID, has shifted. That building volatility will impact as well. But nevertheless, the future will be dominated in the textile sector, textile manufacturing sector, and particularly in window furnishings, by the placing ourselves in the market of high demand for high custom, high quality products.
Thanks, Steve. That theme's coming through, that high end of the market. Will that need, or will that opportunity need to have some underpinning skills to provide custom products? It sounds like it's quite a costly exercise to customise a product for each individual person. What skills would be required?
Sure, thanks. From our perspective, that's the business ecosystem that we now face. And that combines energy, trade, source of material, but also the nature of the market. The consumer market in our space now has an anticipation of a shorter product life cycle. Window furnishings were typically up to 20 years in place, and now the consumer sentiment appears to be much shorter, of around 6 to 8 years. But what we will see in terms of skilling and ensuring that the supply of product is cost effective, even though it is highly custom and high quality, will be the use of what is generally called Industry 4, competency and capability, integrated e-commerce solutions from retail to retail, mobile manufacturing, production, mobile assembly, and a vast range of products that meet whole new rating requirements, cyclone, fire, sound, energy saving, and so on. We suspect, and here is the future of training for our sector, and I take Sasha's comments very much as being applicable to our sector. Apprenticeships have a huge role to play in our sector. Agile apprenticeships and apprenticeships that reflect the wide diversity of skill and knowledge that is a requirement of this sector. This sector requires certainly manufacturing and a literacy around quality, but it also requires a capability around customer service. Certainly at the end of the supply chain, installation capability, maintenance. They're the capabilities or the competencies that need to be written into training pathways. The training pathway for our industry will commence. It's relatively new to our industry, by the way, but the training pathway will commence in schools. People will undertake programs that are appropriately designed for people in school to consider an option to then potentially take a pathway into an apprenticeship qualification that has that diversity of skill and knowledge, and then even higher to technicians, and picking up on some of the comments made about design. Fundamentally, there's a key issue around leadership in the workplace around apprenticeships. and we need to support apprenticeships, and those that supervise and ensure apprentices are led effectively. We need to support them as well.
Steve, I just wanted to stop you there. Just before we go to the poll, I just have one observation to make. With that need and reliance on an agile approach and the technology, what you're flagging is those STEM skills will need to be stronger going forward. Is that right? Have I observed that correctly?
If the question is to me,
yeah,
STEM skills certainly, but I think too a more intuitive approach to the application of technology and data-based solutions. Integrated technology platforms have a significant application already in our sector, where CNC machines are cutting multiple products simultaneously and are capable of more complex processes as well. So it's a more integrated and intelligent approach to the engagement of those technology platforms.
Thank you, Steve. That's really a valuable observation around the way forward. It looks like we're really going to have to ramp up on not only the technology skills, but also the underpinning skills and an agile approach. What we'd like to do now is go to the poll, and once we've so I'll hand over to Michelle to run the poll. When we come back from the poll, we're going to stay together as a group because the conversations have been so engaging, and call out to a few more key people in our group. So I'll hand over to you, Michelle.
Thank you, Antoinette. So I'll open up the poll now. There are 3 questions. Please can you make sure you make a choice for each of them and click that submit button at the bottom. Really important to pop your choices in there. Thank you. You've got 2 minutes to do that. Please just scroll down on the right if you can't see the other questions. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. We've got about a minute to go. So the rest of you could please, there are about 7 of you who have started but not hit that submit button. If you could just go ahead and complete that, that would be wonderful. Thank you very much. Just 3 more people. Thank you. All right, I'm closing that down now, and I'll pop the results up there. Thank you. All right, Antoinette, can you see the results there?
I can, thank you, Michelle. So what we can see is that the majority of people who did vote thought that there were between 1 or 2 priority opportunities in the priority areas. So that's good to see that there are those opportunities that exist there. Then the second question around significant changes as how work will be organised over the next 5 years. Not surprisingly, there'll be a lot of adoption of new technologies which is what is definitely coming through today and has come through previously. And the extent to which workforce skill development will be critical, not surprisingly, it's a great extent, which I think makes our roles even more important. So thank you very much for running the poll, Michelle. What we'd like to do now is, rather than go to breakout groups, is keep this group together, and I'll ask Phil to now spend the next half an hour with some of the other people in this group that we've organised to speak on some of these key questions. Thanks, Phil.
Thanks, Antoinette. My apologies for disrupting the program. We had intended to have 2 breakout groups, one of which was going to be chaired by Steve Quirk, who spoke then, the other by Matt Scrimmager, who is a member of the IRC. Unfortunately, Matt, I'm going to put you right on the spot and ask, you've seen and heard the answers to those questions, and your group was specifically going to look at apprenticeship training. I think there's been some interesting comments there, particularly in the apprenticeship area from Sasha and Steve. Have you got comments that you'd like to add to that as well?
Thanks, Phil. Yeah, g'day everyone. Look, apprenticeships, like being in the industry, the cabinet making industry, apprenticeships are critical, and I thoroughly agree with Sasha's comments that changes do take a number of years to get through the pipeline, and I guess that's a real key with anything that we try and change. And I do realise in our industry that we really do need to adapt to the new technologies that are coming in. So I guess allowing our apprentices to do that, I think a big part, and I recognise RTO involvement in all of their training, but the big part I think has to, or the biggest amount of, the largest amount of training input has to come from the employer and a willingness to do that. So making employers aware in the industry of how critical it is that their apprentices are upskilling in technology and the new skill sets that are emerging is a real key, in my opinion.
Okay. Have we got? Are there other people who are participating who would like to sort of make some insights about their own experiences around getting or ensuring that apprentices are critical to, not critical, but that they are continually available for the sector? Okay, I noticed Kay Gerard was online. I'm wondering, Kay, you're involved obviously with textiles IRC and have an interest in that area in WA through your job. Have you got any insights you'd like to share with the group today?
Yeah, I do actually, Philip. I was just about to unmute myself when you mentioned my name, so there you go. Obviously, we cover the furniture industry. We're an ITAB for WA, so we provide advice to government on, skill shortages and all that sort of stuff. And we're actually seeing skill shortages right now with a lot of the furniture making businesses here in WA are absolutely flat out with contracts and whatever. So, and they're starting to recognise that they're having skill shortages. One of the things I'm hearing all the time from an employer point of view is they say they don't want first or second year apprentices, they'd rather employ third or fourth year. But the problem being is you can't employ, you can't have a third or fourth year apprentice without having a first or second year apprentice. So I think there's a real issue with the transition from school into an apprenticeship, and employers are quite hesitant in engaging a new apprentice. So I think that's a bit of a barrier to the industry.
Okay, and I was also conscious Adrian Boiling is in the crowd, and he comes, I believe, at these issues from a marine perspective. Is there something that you could add to that, Adrian?
Yeah, I can. I'll welcome everyone. Yeah, I can add from the West Australian perspective that we have a fairly unique system over here, where for our apprentice base at TAFE, we have a series of different sectors that we're training for, being the marine sector being one of them, but also the combination of shop fitting, cabinet making, etc. We are sort of in the process of getting a particular marine stream for training on board because of their unique skills over here. We were approached by the marine industry in Western Australia to put together a training platform or a new pathway within the qualification. So yeah, we do have quite a unique base over here. So for our apprentices, we do see a definite need for apprentices here in WA at the moment. Like Kay mentioned, we are in a very much a skill shortage area at the moment for apprentices. We have a number of employers contacting us on a weekly basis looking for skilled staff. But particularly for the marine sector, what the marine sector is looking for is recognition of a pathway for the training, so that it makes it easier to identify tradespeople who have gone through that particular pathway of training and had that specialised skills delivered to them throughout their apprenticeship.
Okay, look, thanks for that. Tim Cleary, this is one of these occasions when, because no one's using the chat box, I'm working my way through the participants list. Tim, you're with the ITAB in New South Wales, and I was wondering if you had some angles on this issue as well. Those critical changes that you see in the sector over the next 5 years.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. It's hard to say. Most of the feedback I'm getting from the employers in New South Wales is that they're just struggling to find apprentices. They haven't really got to the stage of anticipating skills needs down the future. They're really just trying to get some bodies onto the shop floor at the moment.
Yeah, okay. So, Leah, you're also involved in a related IRC, and obviously with TAFE New South Wales. Have you got some insights into this area as well?
You can just unmute yourself down the bottom of the screen. That would be wonderful. Phil, possibly whilst we're waiting, if I could just remind everybody, if you can't find your chat box, just below the polling, just above the polling, you should see the chat with a arrow pointing to the right. Just click on that and open up your chat, or click on the chat icon bottom right so you can pop your questions in the chat box. Thank you. Phil, I'm not sure if she's going to be able to unmute herself. Maybe she doesn't know. Sorry, she's unmuted, but it's not working. I'll double check. Okay, don't worry. I think you might need to go to someone else. I'll try to help her. Thank you.
I'm going to go around the federation, and Wayne Lee is in the group, and Wayne has a role with the Queensland Government out of AI Group in Queensland. Wayne, what perspectives do you see from Queensland?
Actually, I just want to come back to that point that was made by the ITAB in WA. I'm sorry, it was Eden. Just in regard to the first and the second year apprentices, I don't know what the arrangements are in WA, but I know here in Queensland we have a high proportion of vetting schools happening, and certainly the furniture making pathways in the Cert 2 in that qualification just to give you an idea, I'm sorry I'm looking away, I'm just looking at the data here. For the year 1920, we had 924 apprentices undertaking cabinet making apprenticeships in Queensland. That same year we had almost 900 young people undertaking the Cert 2 in the furniture making pathways through vet and school programs. So I'm just wondering, like here in Queensland, we tend to have a really good arrangement between industry and schools as far as feeding potential apprentices, either through work experience or preferably school-based apprenticeships.
Yes,
I'm wondering if that's happening in other states.
Did I call you?
We've got somebody with a mic on who's just had a phone call, unfortunately.
I can respond to that if you like.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yep.
Wayne, yes, look, it was only yesterday I talked to a group of teachers who were delivering the Furniture Pathways qualification in high schools over here. We've got about 450 students doing that particular qualification in 2019, but unfortunately the schools aren't engaging with industry or vice versa, so they're not transitioning into jobs. So we're looking at how we can improve that. In WA, a lot of our schools are autonomous, which means that there's not an overarching umbrella coordination process.
Yes,
but ideally, we'd like to get a lot of those students transitioning into jobs.
Yeah, absolutely, Kay. And thank you for taking my point in the way that was meant to be. It wasn't about, oh, we're better than you. It was, hey, this is what we're finding here in Queensland kind of thing. And I think industry has learnt to work very closely with the education system here. I mean, let's face it, apprenticeships have probably been around about 600 or 700 years, and I'm sure it's always been the same complaint that everyone would prefer a third-year apprentice to a first-year apprentice for that 600 or 700 years.
Well, yes, that's probably right. But there's a point there that Leah's made in the chat, which I think connects to that, and she's alluding to Sasha's comment that the trades are fairly narrowly defined in the furnishing area, and I'd certainly be interested to get people's insights. Wayne and Kay having just touched on the related issues as to whether or not there isn't a case for a broader trades qualification to cover a wider range of activity in the furnishing area.
Yeah, maybe if I can have the word there.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Sasha.
Yeah, look, just to draw a bit of a picture of how this is all made up in the furnishing industry, we've got so many different sectors all trying to deliver a separate apprenticeship and very little career pathways, which if you look at it from the perspective of an apprentice, makes it actually quite unattractive and confusing. So if you're an apprentice and let's say you're at school and you do your working classes and maybe a certificate in furniture making and you want to make it a career, you're looking at, well, what am I actually going to do now? Am I taking up an apprenticeship as a cabinet maker, a furniture maker, or what am I doing and what are my opportunities to go forward in this career? And it's very confusing for everyone. When I interview potential apprentices, usually they say they like to working with wood, but they're not quite sure of where this is taking them. And that makes it a bit hard for apprentices to actually get into the industry. They maybe go and make a cabinet making apprenticeship, but then they realise this is not actually what I want to do. I want to work with solid timber, so I'm better off going into the furniture industry. But the apprenticeship course of cabinet making might not apply very good for a furniture maker. And the same, like Adrian Boyling said, is for marine fit outs. They require a different skill set from their apprentices. So if you combine these two things now, those different sectors and the lack of an opportunity for a career, it makes sense to have your courses, all these little very similar courses. Don't get me wrong, that they have different areas of expertise, but they all use the same machines. We need the same basic knowledge to combine it all and then give those people a career pathway like it is in Europe. In Europe, you have a clear vocational pathway all the way up to a master's degree in cabinet making, for example. You can take a university course and they have a master's degree in wood technology. Here we don't have it. We have a certificate 3, and from there on, it's up to you what you want to do if you become project manager or something like that. But if we look at the industry, what they actually need is they need specialised people. So people who can work, who can start drafting, who can operate CNC machine or more modern CNC machine within their particular sector. So if we have a foundation apprenticeship, let's call it a certificate 3 in woodworking, for example, and then from there on give apprentices an opportunity to go and have a certificate 4 or a diploma within their special sector, you would not only help the apprentices by giving them a career path, but you would also help the industry by saying, look, it's worth taking our current trades and giving them that little course. That might only be a couple of months or a half year. And those courses could be consolidated. Not every city has to have it. Like you could send someone over to Queensland, for example, to do that course because there the demand might be bigger. Does that make sense?
Sasha, Wayne from Queensland here. I couldn't agree with you more. And actually, I made a note from your previous statement because my perception of what you were saying was that it's almost been RTO driven by what they're able to deliver. So, for example, an employer wants a particular training plan and their local TAFE can't or is unwilling to deliver that to their requirements. So it's basically where the RTO says, no, well, this is what we're offering, so it's what you've got to do, unless you want your apprentice to drive 3 hours to the next regional area. I'd like to see greater flexibility between RTOs, whether they're private or whether they're TAFE, where they're able to partner, if you like, in the delivery of a training plan. So, for example, in a regional city, whereabouts are you based, Sasha?
We're over in Perth.
Okay, over in Perth. So I know a little bit about Perth. So let's say if I was a cabinet maker in Albany, then what Albany TAFE might be able to deliver the first 2 blocks of the training. But then my apprentice might need to go to Perth TAFE to have that specific, the 3rd and 4th blocks delivered because in that specific area. I don't think we can expect every RTO in every region to be able to deliver everything. In fact, we can't. Just the cost of the tech alone as far as the equipment goes to deliver the underpinning theory makes it too expensive. But I think we need to be able to see more arrangements between RTOs partnering where those core units and some of the early electives are being delivered locally, and then they're going to the centre of excellence to have their 3rd and 4th year blocks delivered. That's my belief anyway.
Correct. And if you look at it from a TAFE perspective, they get pushed from all these industry to include these specialised skills. Let's say, marine fit-outs, what Adrian's already said. So they're pushing to get that into, at the moment, what is only a cabinet-making apprenticeship. So TAFE will be overwhelmed with the amount of knowledge they have to convey to their apprentices, which might not be relevant for every apprentice. So it doesn't seem to be very efficient. If we rather say we'll do one solid course, and I was fortunate enough to work in a lot of those different sectors, and I know that a lot of the basic skills, core level skills, are in the same sector. So combine them together, teach that properly, make sure that the competency level is definitely there. And once that's proven, then to move further on to a specialised course, and then it would make sense, for people, even regional guys, to send their apprentices out to do those little specialised courses in order for them to get something out of it too.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Is my microphone working now?
Yes, that sounds like Leah.
Oh, awesome. Hi, everyone. Sorry. Headsets. Really great discussion, really interesting discussion. Really interesting points and suggestions from Wayne there. Just circling back, Richard made a comment in the chat pod about Sasha's comment, I think it was, around that maybe the existing grades are maybe too finely divided and perhaps a broader approach to furnishing trade should be considered. And that's a bit of what we've been talking about. I just want to comment that, you know, it's a really tricky situation because if we say, for example, there's a lot of discussion at the moment about reducing the number of qualifications, maybe folding some into so that we have like a Certificate 3 in cabinet making that takes in timber and composite machining, maybe the furnishing, maybe that takes in upholstery. There's a lot of discussion in this space, and it's a really tricky one. There's a massive tension between the two ideas because on one hand, it makes a lot of sense because you've got registered training organisations that are trying to maintain all of these niche qualifications. The burden of compliance in order to do that is really, really heavy. And so the RTOs are actually pulling out of these markets. If you have a look at upholstery, for example, I mean, how many places is that actually offered in Australia? And, you know, is that because it's a separate qualification? Would it make it any different? You know, would RTOs actually pick it up if it, say, sat within one of the other qualifications like cabinet making that they have? But then you start to talk about removing the trade identity, which we saw when we went from wood machining to timber and composite machining. So once we start to play around with the trade identity, we start to have to see declining enrolments because the industry doesn't recognise that trade by its name. So they don't pick up and enroll apprentices because they think the trade is gone. So I guess it's, you know, it's a really, really tricky situation. You know, there's been talk about, you know, maybe we have a Certificate 3 in furnishing and in brackets there's cabinet making and then there's another one, upholstery, and another one, because if you call it Certificate 3 in cabinet making, in brackets upholstery, no one's going to do it because an upholstery person does not want to be a cabinet maker. We're finding, talking to industry about at the moment about surface coating for kitchen cabinets, for example. And we're talking to them, they want their own training package, but they're not wanting to engage with this process because the suggestion is that they get a Certificate 3 in cabinet making and immediately go, we don't want cabinet makers. And so the title is making such a difference in the way that we, you know, you wouldn't think it would matter, but it really matters to industry, and that trade identity is really important. But how we balance that and how we, you know, I think we do need to do some consolidation, but how we do that, we need to be really wise about how we do that so that we don't make some of the, I don't want to say mistakes, but, you know, we learn from what's happened in the past with trade identity, and we make sure that whatever decisions we make, that we, you know, we make these decisions, we make them right, and we also follow it up with a communication strategy so industry knows what's happening. Because as much as we'd love deep and broad and wide engagement with industry, industry are not overly aware that they have a say in the national training system. And so they don't always understand or are aware of the you know, the impacts and the flow and effect. That's my two, Bob. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Leah. So I think there's some...
Can I respond to Leah a little bit? Just shortly? Quickly?
Yes.
Leah, in WA a couple of years ago, we didn't have any delivery of timber and machining or upholstery. They were actually being delivered out of Queensland due to low numbers. And industry, you know, when it came back to WA, it's not, like at the moment, I think we've got 6 apprentices in upholstery, and that's actually very good for us. So it's recognised now that it's just not feasible doing it the way that, you know, ideally, you know, we would love to have all of these apprenticeships labelled as an upholsterer or a whatever. So I'm not sure what the magic solution is, but our industries over here now recognise that all of these individual pockets are making it difficult to be delivered. And they're now open to having discussions around, you know, whether you call it rationalising or streamlining or whatever you call it. Because WA didn't have any training for a few years, they now recognise that maybe things have to change just so that we can continue getting skilled people.
Phil, it's Richard, if I can just say a few words.
Yes, Richard, go ahead.
I think Sasha made a few interesting points, and I acknowledge Leah's point about the difficulties, especially for RTOs. But one of the things I think Sasha said that we should maybe get a bit of discussion on was that he mentioned there is a merging happening in a lot of technologies. I think, Sasha, you especially mentioned the CNC area, where CNC is coming into wood machining, into kitchen and bathroom making, into cabinet making. You know, programming skills, CNC operation skills, some of that is common. You mentioned the CNC training was lacking. So one element, I think, is to not imagine the point is about immediately collapsing all trades, but maybe some type of analysis of where that merger is happening and how that is to be accommodated both on the employment side as to whether there needs to be some change in, you know, apprenticeship titles and what people can be apprenticed in a way that encourages that long-term career visibility that I think Sasha mentioned is there in Europe. And secondly, on the training side, it's probably a matter of seeing where some of the unit level consolidation can happen, and maybe it's not upholstery, but it might be that there's some merger between CNC skills in the wood machining, the cabinet making, the kitchen and bathroom areas. So it's both that employment side. We should, I think, really consider Sasha's point about making that long-term opportunity all the way, as I think, Sasha, you said, up to a master's level in furnishing in Europe. So it's not just about the training and about the RTO, it's about making the industry present its careers and its employment arrangements in the best possible way as well.
Yeah, if I can give you just an example how it usually works in a lot of European countries, that's Switzerland, Germany, Finland, I think Sweden have a very similar one as well. They have 3 years apprenticeship in, let's call it cabinet making. They have their own words obviously for it. And in those 3 years of cabinet making, they include the core skill level that is overall with all those little sectors. So joiner, even if you're a window maker, a door maker, a cabinet maker, a furniture maker, or even if upholstery, I think is a bit separate. But all these little areas are all combined into one. And then in this apprenticeship, they have courses that go to set different levels. Let's say you have a level 1 course in wood machining, then you have a level 2 course, a level 3 and level 4. In order to get your apprenticeship as a cabinet maker, you have to complete wood machining level 1 and 2. The same goes for furniture finishing. You have to complete level 1 and 2 in order to achieve a certificate in cabinet making. What that essentially did, or the reason why they did that, is for small businesses who cannot afford a wood machinist to operate because they just don't have the volume of work. Or wood finishing, for example. They cannot employ a wood finisher to do their work because there's just not enough of it. They'll focus more on supporting mid-sized businesses, startup businesses. So when they have a qualification in let's say cabinet making, for example, they can work pretty much everything they need to produce a piece of furniture and sell it. That included drafting to a certain level, estimating, everything you needed to start up your business. And I think that's very important that we focus on that, get that right, and not take the description of, let's say, upholsterer or furniture maker away, but have that as a higher specialisation level. Let's call it a certificate 4, if you like, whatever the terminology may be in that. So we do not delete any of those sectors, but we just refine them and make sure we have a solid foundation that where they come from and where they then branch off.
Thanks, Sasha. Steve Quirk, you've been involved with the training system industry for many, many years. And I think if I would take out two messages from today. One is the importance going forward of design, and two is the need to break down and broaden out, particularly apprenticeships, but I think that could probably be extended to the way that qualifications in the sector are set up more generally. And indeed, IBS is doing some work on that right at the moment with the Furnishing IRC. But from blinds and awnings and soft furnishing perspective, do you want to pick up those themes for us as well?
Thanks very much, Phil. We see in particularly this very specific sector in window furnishings, we have a view of apprenticeships that is perhaps a bit more resonant with, I think, what Sasha's been describing. And that is a much broader view. And I guess as an industry, we can afford to do that because apprenticeships have not been a part of our industry. Well, qualifications existed for 10 years or something, but it's really only in the last couple of years that it's escalated. The answer to the question is yes, and here's why. Even though apprenticeships are new to our sector, we have some really interesting data. Now, it's not NCVR standard research data, but we found some really simple things that have had a massive impact on the industry. By engaging apprentices in training in the workplace, we've kept their learning local and familiar. Where facilities aren't available, businesses have created technology learning centres where apprentices from other firms can come in and develop skills with particular technology, particular applications.
Stephen?
Hello?
Stephen, apologies. Could you just speak up a bit louder, please? A lot of people are struggling to hear you. Thank you.
Okay, is that any better?
A lot better, thank you.
Thank you. So I was saying that we found that because apprenticeships are fairly new, recent to our sector, we've taken a fairly broad approach to it, where there's been a great deal more sharing of capability and approaches. And as a consequence, by keeping it familiar, we've been able to engage a greater diversity of apprentices. Just under 40% of our apprentices, for example, are women. Just under 30%, and I apologise for my term, are people who come from a culturally and linguistically diverse background. We also have an older apprenticeship group, people from their mid-20s to early to mid-30s. And we, the apprenticeship skilling is more diverse and it covers a much wider range of certainly technical skills, but also associated skills, service and so on. And apprentices feel valued. They contribute more to the business outcomes at an appropriate level. And they're able to do more and invest themselves more in the operation. Now the net benefit has been remarkable. Businesses that have engaged, and this is across the sector, I emphasise, it varies between individual businesses. But for example, the rate of rework, that is product highly diversified product, custom made, custom manufactured. It goes out to a site and there's a problem with it. That requires a rework. Once a product needs to be reworked, as quality and efficiency people among us will say, the profitability of that product drops. By dropping the reworks by over 30%, the profitability of businesses has soared. And that's a direct result of the packaging of competencies that are directly relevant to the business and the industry at hand. And that's what's driven the way forward. The fundamental benefit is retention. The program is running about an 85% retention of people, which is very encouraging. So there's a stability that's been engineered into the apprentice training approach, but it's largely because it's in the workplace, both on and off the job, and where necessary, located in other workplaces. And that seems to be some of the key factors that have driven the way forward. The other is, of course, the leadership, the preparing and training of apprentice supervisors for specifically that role. We realised we had to do that as the industry had not been exposed to apprenticeships previously, and we found that particularly useful.
Thanks, Steve. That's a really useful insight. I've got one quick thing which I'm going to try and get a response to, because I'm conscious I think we're down to about 5 minutes to go. But in the discussion yesterday with MEM, there's a big focus on, and not surprisingly, shouldn't be focused on individual sectors, but rather the key issue was supply chain. And I'm wondering if people in this group have got comments to make on that. Sasha, we keep coming back to you, but I'm wondering in your business, supply chain is critical, ensuring there's no gaps in materials and the way that the production system is working.
Yeah, well, in terms of supply chain, I mean, material supplies have always been good. What I see a bit of lacking, what Peter Kitely already said, is the industry working with designers. So usually the designers specify what's used in larger commercial projects. And if the designers are not aware of modern technologies or materials, that then obviously trickles down to the cabinet maker. So we a lot of times get frustrated of what's designed just because we have maybe a bit more technical knowledge about the application of CNC machines, for example. And like Peter said, it's not utilised enough. Now, I've spent a lot of years over in Asia myself working there and also in Europe, and I know they use it to a lot more potential than we do currently here. Probably that's a problem of education and skilled people to train our current employees on it. I don't know if that helps, but yeah, in terms of the materials, there's never been an issue. It's more about modern new technologies. Like I know of things that I've used in Asia, for example, materials there that they are available here, but not to everyone's knowledge. So obviously TAFEs are not picking up on it. I don't think it's their job either to bring these new technologies to apprentices. But there is no sort of, let's say, architectural fairs or any industry that would distribute that knowledge through the industry and the workforce. So maybe that gets left behind a little bit. If you're looking into future developments, I think we're far behind European countries there, very far behind.
Thanks for that. I am conscious of the time. I think we've got about 3 minutes. And Christian, I think coming back to you. There are sort of 2 or 3 really key messages there today. One around the importance of design, and I think we've linked design back to production right at the end there as well. But also the work that needs to be done. It certainly sounds like the sort of broader-based qualification options and apprenticeships are a key way of moving forward as well. So I'll hand back to you to wrap the session up.
Thanks, Phil, and I think you're spot on with your analysis there, and thank you for running that session. It's a shame we've run out of time because it was absolutely fascinating. I just want to thank Joanne, Sasha, Peter and Steve. A lot of what was said today from my other hat on, sitting in my employer's role at AI Group, a lot of these things are on the policy agenda, and I hope to see under the new strategies that have been put forward and the manufacturing strategy put forward by the government that we see some progression and some movement that really helps the industry in the coming months. So where to from here? Look, coming to the end of today, but we'll plenty more opportunities. IPSA is going to take forward a lot of the culmination of all of the webinar series and put forward suggestions and ideas through to the government as this folds out into the new year. We certainly would look forward to the opportunity of more sessions like this, more discussions with industry outside of just the IRC, but bringing the groups together of employers and getting a feel for some of the suggestions coming out from government and whether they're fitting with what an industry wants. So stay tuned, stay clear in IPSA's website to look for any events into the future. And again, I just want to thank you all for your participation today and look forward to speaking with you into the new year. Thank you.